Sunday, June 18, 1815, relentless rain finally ended as sunlight pierced dark clouds, revealing Waterloo's scarred battlefield where thousands prepared for history's decisive confrontation. Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte studied the muddy landscape from La Belle Alliance, confidently believing his 72,000 experienced soldiers would soon crush the determined Allied defenders ahead. Across the ridge, the Duke of Wellington calmly positioned 68,000 Anglo-Allied troops behind reverse slopes, hiding their strength from curious French eyes awaiting battle. Far to the east, Prussian Field Marshal Gebhard von Blücher hurried relentlessly toward Waterloo, leading exhausted soldiers determined to rescue Wellington before Napoleon secured complete victory. Marshal Michel Ney impatiently gripped his saber beside thousands of disciplined cavalry, believing one unstoppable charge would finally shatter the stubborn Allied defensive formations forever. The mighty French Grand Battery suddenly erupted, unleashing 80 thunderous cannons whose iron projectiles ripped across muddy fields, shaking earth, smoke, and terrified soldiers simultaneously. Every deafening explosion echoed across Waterloo, filling frightened hearts with uncertainty while commanders desperately calculated each move during humanity's most consequential military confrontation unfolding before them. Yet imagine changing only one extraordinary detail, introducing a single impossible weapon capable of transforming this legendary battlefield into something history never anticipated witnessing before. High above invisible clouds, a mysterious B-2 Spirit stealth bomber silently approached Waterloo, unnoticed by every soldier, commander, horse, cannon, and frightened civilian watching below. The futuristic flying wing cruised effortlessly 50,000 feet above Earth, carrying devastating precision weapons, unimaginable to anyone living during Napoleon's remarkable military campaigns across Europe. Neither French scouts nor Allied lookouts noticed the strange aircraft because advanced stealth technology concealed its presence beyond anything 19th century science could possibly understand or explain. Inside the bomber, two highly trained crew members calmly monitored sophisticated instruments, realizing they carried unimaginable power capable of rewriting centuries of European history within mere minutes. Below them, thousands confidently prepared traditional muskets, cavalry sabers, cannons, and bayonets, completely unaware modern technology had silently entered their primitive battlefield without warning whatsoever. At precisely 11:45, General d'Erlon's massive infantry formations advanced confidently uphill, expecting fierce musket fire instead of unimaginable destruction, descending silently from invisible skies above. Without warning, hidden bomb bay doors slowly opened, releasing precision-guided JDAM bombs that quietly accelerated downward toward tightly packed French infantry marching beneath unsuspecting officers. Seconds later, overwhelming explosions shattered peaceful expectations, creating enormous fireballs, crushing shockwaves, and terrifying craters that instantly erased disciplined formations from Waterloo's muddy battlefield forever. Experienced veterans froze completely, unable to understand invisible devastation striking without cannons, rockets, lightning, or any recognizable weapon previously witnessed throughout countless brutal European campaigns. General d'Erlon's proud First Corps collapsed within moments, thousands disappearing beneath smoke, earth, steel fragments, and relentless explosions no battlefield commander could possibly counter effectively. Marshal Ney watched helplessly as disciplined ranks dissolved into confusion, desperately searching cloudless skies for hidden enemies while surviving soldiers screamed beneath unimaginable, relentless devastation everywhere. Napoleon himself stared silently across burning fields, struggling desperately to explain impossible destruction because every familiar rule governing warfare suddenly collapsed before astonished experienced commanders alike. Meanwhile, Wellington observed distant explosions through his telescope, equally confused because nothing resembling conventional artillery, rockets, or naval bombardment matched astonishing destruction unfolding before his eyes. Neither alliance understood invisible precision attacks originated from unimaginable future technology operating peacefully above clouds, unreachable by muskets, cannons, cavalry charges, or desperate battlefield courage below. Within less than 30 devastating seconds, thousands lay dead, wounded, or missing, transforming Napoleon's carefully organized offensive into overwhelming confusion before meaningful combat truly even began. The terrifying psychological impact spread faster than explosions themselves, destroying confidence throughout French ranks as frightened survivors questioned whether supernatural forces had entered Waterloo alongside determined Allied armies. Despite extraordinary destruction below, the stealth bomber remained completely untouched, continuing its mission effortlessly while carrying additional devastating weapons ready for subsequent battlefield objectives awaiting immediate execution. The bomber crew calmly prepared another precision strike, reviewing advanced targeting systems, while 19th century armies desperately reorganized shattered formations beneath smoke-filled skies without understanding their invisible enemy. Napoleon refused immediate retreat, believing determination and experience could somehow overcome mysterious battlefield disasters, unaware even greater devastation still waited beyond the next crucial military decision. French officers courageously rallied surviving infantry, attempting restoring order despite overwhelming fear spreading through exhausted ranks after witnessing unimaginable destruction beyond ordinary human understanding and reason. As thick smoke drifted slowly across Waterloo, history balanced precariously between familiar reality and impossible intervention, preparing for an even more astonishing second chapter moments later. The greatest battle of Napoleon's remarkable career had barely begun, yet mysterious modern technology already threatened everything Europe believed about courage, warfare, destiny, and ultimate military supremacy. The thunderous explosions finally faded, leaving burning wreckage, shattered formations, and terrified survivors struggling to comprehend an invisible enemy beyond every known military imagination and doctrine. At exactly 1 o'clock, Napoleon refused surrendering initiative, ordering Marshal Ney to unleash 5,000 elite cavalry against Wellington's seemingly vulnerable defensive positions without hesitation whatsoever. Thousands of armored cuirassiers lowered polished sabers and lances, urging powerful horses forward as disciplined columns thundered confidently across Waterloo's soaked fields beneath bright afternoon sunlight. To every observer below, the magnificent cavalry charge appeared unstoppable, representing centuries of battlefield tradition where fearless horsemen often decided Europe's greatest military victories through unmatched courage. High overhead, however, the B-2 crew calmly selected another devastating attack, locking advanced guidance systems onto densely packed cavalry formations racing directly toward the Allied ridge. Moments later, another deadly wave of precision-guided bombs silently descended, completely unnoticed, until overwhelming explosions erupted among charging horses and armored riders without any visible warning signs. The peaceful afternoon instantly transformed into unimaginable chaos as frightened horses collapsed violently, armored soldiers disappeared inside enormous craters, and disciplined formations completely disintegrated before reaching enemy lines. Smoke, dust, shattered armor, and terrified animals covered the battlefield, creating scenes beyond humanity's darkest nightmares while survivors desperately searched for shelter from invisible destruction above. Marshal Ney screamed desperate commands, attempting to regroup surviving cavalry, yet panic spread faster than discipline because nobody understood how invisible death struck with terrifying precision repeatedly. Even Napoleon's most fearless veterans hesitated, questioning whether advancing further meant certain death against an opponent possessing powers no experienced commander could realistically defeat through conventional battlefield tactics. Across the ridge, Wellington remained speechless while watching destruction consume his greatest enemy, realizing fortune itself seemed strangely determined to protect the exhausted Allied defensive positions today. Experienced British officers exchanged confused glances because every devastating explosion exceeded conventional artillery, proving unknown forces influenced Waterloo beyond ordinary human strategy or battlefield experience entirely. French cavalry losses mounted catastrophically within minutes, with thousands killed, wounded, scattered, or trapped beneath fallen horses before striking Wellington's disciplined infantry squares even once successfully. The unstoppable cavalry charge, celebrated throughout military history, ended almost instantly, destroyed by unseen precision weapons centuries beyond anything Napoleon's brilliant tactical mind could ever anticipate encountering. Above the battlefield, the stealth bomber continued circling effortlessly, consuming fuel efficiently while carrying remaining bombs reserved for even more strategically important military objectives approaching rapidly below. Inside the cockpit, advanced displays tracked battlefield movements continuously, allowing the crew to identify valuable targets impossible for 19th century commanders even to imagine locating accurately themselves. Napoleon desperately searched for logical explanations, believing hidden artillery batteries or experimental weapons somehow caused relentless devastation, destroying his carefully organized plans beyond immediate recovery completely. No messenger, scout, or battlefield observer could identify the mysterious attacker because nothing visible existed except peaceful blue skies stretching endlessly above smoke-covered fields and terrified armies. Confidence throughout the French ranks steadily disappeared, replaced by growing fear that supernatural punishment had descended upon them during Europe's most important military confrontation of the century. Meanwhile, Wellington wisely resisted unnecessary attacks, allowing confusion and invisible bombardment to weaken Napoleon's exhausted forces before committing precious Allied reserves into decisive battlefield action later. The battlefield echoed with wounded soldiers, frightened horses, collapsing equipment, desperate cries, and relentless confusion, while invisible technology silently dictated history from impossible heights above unsuspecting humanity below. Every passing minute widened the psychological advantage because disciplined formations require confidence, yet mysterious destruction completely shattered trust between soldiers, commanders, courage, and familiar battlefield expectations everywhere. Napoleon still possessed determined infantry, experienced officers, and loyal Imperial Guard veterans, yet invisible precision warfare steadily erased every traditional advantage earned through decades of brilliant campaigning. The B-2 crew reviewed remaining ammunition carefully, understanding each precision strike carried extraordinary consequences capable of permanently reshaping Europe's political future and humanity's understanding of warfare forever. Below, exhausted French survivors reorganized scattered units, unaware another devastating phase approached, targeting critical artillery positions essential for supporting Napoleon's remaining hopes of battlefield victory today. What began as history's greatest cavalry assault had transformed into overwhelming catastrophe, proving courage alone cannot overcome technology separated by more than 2 centuries of relentless innovation. Dark smoke drifted endlessly across Waterloo while frightened soldiers whispered impossible stories about divine punishment, heavenly fire, and invisible monsters flying silently somewhere beyond ordinary human vision. Every commander sensed history changing before their eyes, yet nobody understood that one futuristic aircraft alone had already rewritten the fate of empires through unmatched technological superiority completely. The next devastating strike would target Napoleon's strongest battlefield asset, removing every remaining chance of recovering control before Allied and Prussian forces finally united against exhausted France. Waterloo's destiny now rested not upon brilliant generals or fearless soldiers, but upon unseen modern technology silently deciding history from far beyond humanity's reach and comprehension. At 2:30 in the afternoon, the distant sound of marching boots announced the arrival of General Bülow's advancing Prussian forces approaching Waterloo from the eastern roads. Recognizing the growing threat, Napoleon immediately ordered General Lobau and 6,000 experienced infantry to defend the vulnerable right flank against determined Prussian reinforcements advancing steadily. French soldiers rushed toward Plancenoit, believing fierce resistance could delay the Prussians long enough for Napoleon to defeat Wellington before overwhelming enemy numbers surrounded his exhausted army. High above the battlefield, advanced radar aboard the B-2 effortlessly detected every troop movement, revealing battlefield positions with astonishing clarity impossible for 19th century military reconnaissance methods. Inside the silent cockpit, the mission commander carefully reviewed multiple targets, calmly selecting Napoleon's most valuable battlefield assets while monitoring every movement unfolding beneath scattered smoke clouds. The remaining French artillery suddenly became the bomber's highest priority because those powerful cannons represented Napoleon's final opportunity to regain battlefield momentum before complete strategic collapse. Without hesitation, precision-guided bombs silently separated from the bomber, beginning another deadly descent toward tightly organized French artillery batteries positioned across Waterloo's devastated muddy landscape below. Artillery crews continued loading heavy cannons, completely unaware invisible destruction raced toward them, believing only conventional enemy fire threatened their carefully prepared battlefield positions that afternoon. Seconds later, devastating explosions consumed the Grand Battery, destroying massive cannons, ammunition wagons, trained artillery crews, and every remaining hope of coordinated French bombardment forever afterward. The ground violently trembled beneath enormous blasts, while shattered cannon barrels, broken wheels, burning equipment, and frightened survivors scattered across fields already soaked with smoke and blood. Napoleon watched helplessly as his greatest battlefield advantage disappeared forever, leaving experienced infantry unsupported against determined Allied defenders holding superior defensive positions along the crucial ridge. French officers desperately attempted saving damaged artillery pieces, yet relentless explosions destroyed everything before organized rescue efforts could even begin amidst overwhelming panic and unimaginable battlefield confusion. Across the battlefield, Allied soldiers stared in stunned disbelief because entire artillery positions vanished within moments without visible attackers, impossible siege weapons, or recognizable military technology anywhere nearby. The Prussians continued advancing confidently, encouraged by distant explosions weakening Napoleon's exhausted forces, while every passing minute increased pressure upon the rapidly collapsing French defensive positions significantly. Napoleon's carefully designed battle plan, unraveled completely because artillery, cavalry, and infantry coordination became impossible after repeated precision strikes shattered communication, confidence, and battlefield organization simultaneously. Even veteran commanders struggled maintaining discipline because frightened soldiers increasingly believed supernatural judgment rather than ordinary warfare determined survival during Waterloo's catastrophic confrontation unfolding before frightened witnesses. The B-2 remained untouchable high above smoke-covered skies, calmly conserving fuel while preparing its final devastating attack against Napoleon's legendary Imperial Guard formations waiting below silently. Only 20 precision bombs remained inside the bomber, yet every remaining weapon possessed enough destructive power to permanently change history within only a few unforgettable, terrifying moments ahead. Napoleon understood victory slipped dangerously away, yet pride, determination, and years of extraordinary success prevented him from abandoning Waterloo before attempting one final desperate offensive against Wellington. Every surviving French veteran realized the coming assault would decide everything because retreat meant humiliation, while advancing invited mysterious destruction beyond anything experienced throughout countless previous military campaigns. Meanwhile, Wellington patiently strengthened vulnerable positions, sensing Napoleon would soon gamble everything upon his elite guard despite mysterious explosions devastating French strength throughout the exhausting afternoon battle. The battlefield resembled complete devastation, with shattered equipment, burning wagons, frightened horses, wounded soldiers, and endless smoke covering once peaceful farmland beneath darkening summer skies everywhere. Still, the invisible bomber quietly circled overhead like a ghost from another century, observing desperate human struggle through advanced sensors beyond 19th century imagination or scientific understanding entirely. Every remaining second increased Allied confidence, while French morale collapsed further, proving psychological warfare sometimes achieves greater victories than overwhelming numbers or extraordinary battlefield courage alone ever could. Napoleon gathered his trusted commanders for one final decision, knowing Europe's future depended entirely upon the legendary Imperial Guard succeeding where every previous assault had disastrously failed already. Veteran guardsmen adjusted uniforms, lifted proud regimental standards, and prepared advancing with absolute loyalty, believing nothing could stop France's most feared and respected soldiers from achieving victory. None among them suspected invisible precision weapons already targeted their formations, transforming honorable determination into heartbreaking tragedy before their historic assault could fully begin against determined Allied defenders. The final chapter approached relentlessly as exhausted armies watched destiny unfold, unaware modern warfare had permanently shattered every traditional belief regarding courage, leadership, and battlefield supremacy forever afterward. Within moments, Napoleon's last hope would march directly into history's most impossible confrontation, facing an unseen enemy impossible to challenge, comprehend, or defeat through conventional military brilliance. The fate of Waterloo, Napoleon, and Europe now rested upon the bomber's final devastating strike, moments away from rewriting history with terrifying precision beyond ordinary human imagination forever. At exactly 4 o'clock, Marshal Ney gathered the legendary Imperial Guard, ordering France's finest veterans to launch one final assault against Wellington's unbroken defensive positions. Thousands of battle-hardened guardsmen marched forward with unwavering discipline, their towering bearskin hats and glittering bayonets symbolizing Napoleon's greatest military pride and final desperate hope. For decades, these elite soldiers had defeated Europe's strongest armies, earning an unmatched reputation for courage, loyalty, determination, and absolute battlefield excellence under Napoleon's inspiring leadership. Every French survivor watched silently as the Imperial Guard advanced, believing these fearless veterans would accomplish what shattered infantry, cavalry, and artillery had failed to achieve earlier. Napoleon fixed his determined gaze upon the advancing columns, placing every remaining hope for victory upon soldiers who had never before experienced defeat in battle anywhere. Far above the battlefield, the B-2 crew selected their final 20 precision-guided bombs, calmly preparing history's most devastating strike against Napoleon's last remaining elite formations below. Advanced targeting systems locked perfectly onto the dense marching columns, calculating exact impact points with astonishing precision unimaginable to every commander desperately fighting across Waterloo's blood-soaked battlefield. Without warning, the bomber released its remaining payload, sending 20 deadly bombs silently descending toward the proud Imperial Guard, advancing confidently beneath clear afternoon skies, completely unaware. For several terrifying seconds, nothing seemed unusual, allowing the determined guardsmen to continue marching proudly toward Wellington's center with disciplined confidence and unquestioned loyalty to their emperor. Then unimaginable explosions erupted simultaneously, ripping apart entire formations with overwhelming fire, earth, steel fragments, deafening shockwaves, and unstoppable destruction spreading across the advancing French columns instantly. The legendary Imperial Guard vanished beneath smoke and flames, their perfect formations collapsing into chaos before reaching the Allied lines they had sworn to conquer forever. Experienced officers desperately shouted commands through deafening explosions, yet discipline disappeared instantly as survivors struggled merely to escape relentless devastation surrounding them from every direction simultaneously. For the first time in history, Napoleon's invincible Imperial Guard began retreating, their legendary courage overwhelmed by an enemy impossible to see, challenge, or even understand completely. The heartbreaking sight shattered every remaining trace of French confidence because the Imperial Guard represented the Empire's ultimate symbol of strength, honor, and military invincibility everywhere. Wellington immediately recognized the historic moment, raising his hat and signaling the entire Allied army to advance boldly against the collapsing French forces without unnecessary hesitation. British, Dutch, Belgian, and German soldiers surged forward enthusiastically, realizing Napoleon's exhausted army could no longer resist coordinated attacks after losing its greatest battlefield advantage forever. Across Waterloo, frightened French soldiers abandoned positions, discarded weapons, and fled desperately as organized resistance collapsed beneath relentless pressure from advancing Allied and Prussian forces together. The battlefield transformed into complete panic, with thousands retreating through smoke, mud, broken wagons, abandoned cannons, wounded comrades, and terrified horses racing wildly across open ground. Napoleon desperately searched for opportunities to restore order, yet every command arrived too late because invisible modern warfare had already decided Waterloo's final outcome beyond recovery. The B-2 mission reached successful completion, its empty bomb bays confirming every precision weapon had been delivered with devastating effectiveness against carefully selected strategic battlefield objectives below. Turning gracefully eastward, the stealth bomber quietly departed the battlefield, leaving terrified armies behind without revealing its identity, origin, or extraordinary technological superiority to anyone surviving. No cannon fired toward the departing aircraft because nobody could detect its presence. Proving complete air dominance against 19th century armies required neither dogfights nor defensive maneuvers whatsoever. Below, shattered French formations continued retreating while victorious Allied soldiers pursued relentlessly, recognizing history unfolded before them through circumstances nobody could ever reasonably explain afterward. The impossible intervention lasted only hours, yet completely transformed Europe's most famous battle into an unimaginable demonstration of overwhelming technological superiority beyond every military expectation or prediction. Napoleon's greatest defeat no longer resulted solely from strategy, numbers, weather, or determination, but from mysterious futuristic power appearing without warning above 19th century Europe unexpectedly. Every surviving witness carried unforgettable memories describing thunder without cannons, destruction without visible attackers, and invisible judgment descending mercilessly from peaceful blue skies throughout Waterloo. As evening approached, exhausted soldiers surveyed burning fields covered with unimaginable devastation, realizing they had experienced something no future generation would ever completely believe or comprehend. The Battle of Waterloo had effectively ended, yet its greatest mystery remained hidden above the clouds, carried away silently by a bomber returning toward another distant century. History's most celebrated battlefield now stood forever changed, preparing the world for consequences extending far beyond Napoleon's defeat and into humanity's uncertain future beyond imagination itself. As darkness slowly settled across Waterloo, victorious Allied soldiers secured the battlefield while exhausted survivors searched desperately among smoke, shattered equipment, and countless fallen comrades everywhere. Napoleon abandoned all remaining hopes of victory, mounting his horse and beginning the painful journey toward Paris, carrying defeat unlike anything previously experienced throughout his extraordinary career. Behind him stretched miles of devastation where thousands of brave soldiers had perished beneath unimaginable explosions, forever changing Europe's greatest battlefield into an unforgettable landscape of tragedy. The Prussian army relentlessly pursued retreating French forces, ensuring Napoleon could never reorganize another powerful army capable of challenging Allied dominance across the European continent again. For the mysterious bomber crew, however, the mission had ended successfully, though the consequences of their impossible intervention would continue echoing across countless generations afterward forever. Returning toward their own century, the crew remained silent, fully understanding they had rewritten history beyond anything military planners or historians could accurately predict with complete confidence. If Napoleon had truly fallen because of futuristic technology, Every political event following Waterloo would unfold differently, creating an entirely unfamiliar version of modern European civilization itself. The Congress of Vienna would reshape Europe without uncertainty, strengthening victorious nations, while permanently eliminating Napoleon's influence over future diplomatic negotiations and continental power balances completely. Perhaps the Franco-Prussian War would never erupt, preventing decades of growing hostility between France and Germany that ultimately reshaped Europe's dangerous political landscape for generations afterward. Without that devastating conflict, the chain of events leading toward the First World War might dramatically change, altering millions of lives across continents forever beyond historical recognition. Future revolutions, alliances, empires, and international rivalries could evolve differently because one impossible aircraft silently intervened during humanity's most celebrated 19th century military confrontation unexpectedly. Historians centuries later would endlessly debate mysterious stories describing thunder without cannons, invisible destruction, and heavenly fire descending upon Napoleon's once invincible army from above. Many survivors might genuinely believe divine intervention saved Europe, inspiring legends, paintings, monuments, churches, and unforgettable folklore surrounding Waterloo's mysterious miracle for countless future generations. Others would insist secret experimental weapons existed, though nobody could produce convincing evidence explaining impossible explosions witnessed simultaneously across the battlefield by thousands of frightened eyewitnesses. Wellington himself would forever remember victory with mixed emotions, realizing success belonged partly to an unknown force beyond strategy, courage, leadership, or traditional battlefield brilliance entirely. Napoleon, reflecting during exile, would endlessly question the invisible enemy that destroyed his final campaign, searching unsuccessfully for logical answers until his dying breath arrived quietly. His memoirs would describe terrifying thunder from cloudless skies, encouraging endless speculation among readers unable to separate impossible truth from unbelievable fiction throughout succeeding centuries afterward. Meanwhile, the bomber crew would quietly protect their extraordinary secret, knowing revealing their mission could threaten history, science, politics, and humanity's understanding of time itself permanently.